Hi everyone. Happy New Year and a warm welcome to all of you. This is the first webinar from the CLO India team for 2020, and going forward we would be doing these live sessions regularly. We would love for you to give us your suggestions on the topic that you want us to cover. My name is Anisha and I'm from the CLO India team, and today we are going to go through some basics which will help us create a strong foundation for the development of our garments and also ensure the quality of our garments. And now my teammates will introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Sumina. So this is a webinar which is focused towards our advanced users who are already proficient in CLO, and Anisha will be covering steps necessary to ensure the quality of your garment. Just to give you a brief, she will be covering some basics like avatars, arrangement of your garment, expressing details, fabrics, and refining the garment for render. So I will let Anisha take over now.
Yeah, hi everyone again, and let's start. So, first of all, I would be covering avatars. Firstly, I'm going to start with alpha forms, which you know are virtual dress forms. So, whenever you upload any kind of avatar, be it a alpha form or a body scanned avatar or your CLO avatar, make sure that all of them are in CLO AVT format. So what that format ensures is that all your avatars in AVT format will have a bounding volume like this, and this bounding volume helps in creating these arrangement points, and therefore you will be able to arrange your garments more easily. So I'm just going to load in an DXF pattern into the workspace. So here you can see this is a hoodie pattern. I'm going into my front view with the shortcut 2, and then using the arrangement points, I'm just going to arrange these patterns here. So sometimes when you are hovering over these blue arrangement points, just zoom in, because like it might be difficult for you to click on a certain blue point. Zoom in and then click on it, because sometimes the movement hinders, you can't exactly pinpoint that arrangement point. So always make sure that you're rotating and zooming in and then arranging it. This is helpful where there are multiple patterns and you're unable to arrange it. So I've arranged this half of my hoodie, and now I'm just going to replicate on to the other side. As you know, arrangement of your patterns in 2D and 3D is very important. So right now I'm pressing 2, which is the shortcut for front view, which gives you an exact 180-degree view of your workspace in the 3D. So I'm just using that front view. I'm going to move the other half like this. And as you know, in CLO, especially when you're working with symmetric garments, it's very easy. Now you can see this blue halo around all these patterns. So that means that your patterns are linked. So whenever I'm making any changes to one side of my pattern, that will be replicated on the other side of the pattern as well. So if I'm making stitches like this, you can see automatically that it gets replicated on the other half as well. So let me just sew the neckline to the hoodie pattern, and simultaneously I can visualize whatever I am sewing together. And I will always ensure that I'm matching my notches, which is very important in CLO to give you the accurate fit of your garment. So you can see there are notches here as well. So I'm making sure I am clicking on all of these like this, and now when I simulate, my garment is ready. And if you've forgotten to sew something like this, you can just go back, and you don't have to rearrange anything. You just click and you have this. You don't have to rearrange any of it again. So once I've done that, I'm going to show you from the side view, which the shortcut is 6. So now you can see from the side, for fit accuracy, there is always balance issues, right? So you would want your garment to have a perfect balance. For that, to ensure that, you always have to create this avatar tape on the shoulder line of your alpha form or CLO avatar, and then match it to the shoulder seam of your garment. So I will just click on this and then I'll simulate, and now you can see it's perfectly aligned on the shoulder. So this secures my garment on the avatar, and this helps me in the fit accuracy of my garment. Now this was alpha forms. Now I'm going to bring in CLO avatar from the library, and I'm just let me bring V2, which is one of the 5.1 versions. So I'm getting a CLO avatar into my workspace. I'm just going to move this. You can see it's very easy in CLO to just move in your garments together, and it's very interactive. I'm just going to place my Okay, so in the 5.1 version, there was symmetric movement of your joints as well. So I'm going to move my joints of the avatar together, and now I can place it. So once I've done this, you can see it's perfectly arranged on my avatar. And you know there are different sizes available in the library as well. So I'm going to use ASTM US Missy straight sizes. So I am going to show you gradually different sizes available. It's just a click away. So if I click on the different sizes, you can see the Missy sizes are increasing. So right now this is a Missy straight 14, and as I increase, you can see the gap between the thighs closes. So that's why there are different poses available, right? So now if I change my pose to something like this, so now there is no space, and you can see that the fabric is kind of colliding with the body of the avatar, and there is no space here as well as here. So that's why we have a plus size poses as well. So that's why you will ensure that when you have changed a default CLO avatar sizes, why maintaining the different poses, or why there are options for different kind of poses here. So now I will go here in the plus size poses, and I will change the pose, and now I have enough space for creating my garments for the plus size avatar. So I hope it's clear on why we have different, every different component of the avatar is important, and it facilitates your workflow. Okay, now I would also, as I was mentioning, different components of the avatar are important in your workflow. I will explain hairstyles as well. So I'm going to load in this another file into the workspace and show you how different hairstyles can also affect your garment. So if I have a garment like this, which is a hoodie or any other style where there is over the head detail, so here right now the hairstyle that I'm using is appropriate for this hoodie. So you will always ensure that the hoodie, when you have a hoodie, you don't use styles like this, hairstyles like a ponytail or a bun, even if it's a ponytail like this or a bun. And if you simulate, you will see that it does not work with the hoodie because it pops out of the hoodie. So I will always make sure that I'm using a hairstyle like this. So if I simulate right now, you will see it works with the hoodie. So this is also one of the important components of why there are different hairstyles available. So you can either use this hairstyle or you can also use this hairstyle, but you won't use a bun or a ponytail. Okay, now this was all about avatars. I think we just wanted to cover some basics. Going forward, we will be doing a lot of other things. So right now I'm going to load in a avatar DXF into the pattern. Let me open a file new. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about different patterns that you use in CLO. As you already know that DXF ASTM and AAMA are the most compatible, but ASTM is highly recommended for CLO. So now I'm just going to bring in this, I'm going to add this and I'm going to open this. So I'm just going to show this in the 2D window. So here you can see there is a seam allowance which exists in this pattern. So what you know that in CLO seam allowances are not required. You don't you eliminate seam allowances. So you don't need to work in your 2D CAD separately and remove this, or you don't even need to remove it here. You just have to click this one option. So right now, whenever I said add DXF pattern into the workspace, there is this option called swap cutting line and sewing line. So what this does is cuts your seam allowance, but it maintains it. So you can export it out along with the seam allowance. So right now I'm clicking on this and I will always click include notches because notches are very important for your construction. So now you can see the difference between these two files. So when I'm going to again open that option just to show you what the difference was. So now you can see, so right now in the options I had clicked swap cutting line and sewing line option. So if I have clicked this option, you get a pattern without the seam allowance, and when I don't click on that option, you will get the seam allowance, which is not required in CLO. So, and whenever you import any kind of pattern, you will always ensure that patterns without notches it is not acceptable and is not recommended because you always need notches. And if these notches were on these baselines, that is still acceptable, but the highly recommended one would be where your notches are on the pattern outline like this. Okay, now I'll reset my workspace like this again, and I'm going to bring in another. Okay, so as I was mentioning it again, I've mentioned it time and again that matching notches is very important. So I just want to show you this example of a file where what I have created, where you can clearly see the difference between matching notches and when you don't match notches, what will be the result. So right now I'm going to focus on this part of the sleeve on both the garments. Both the garments are same, both the patterns are same. I'm just going to click on this. So right now here you can see there is no gather. This sleeve is supposed to have a gather, but because the notches are not matched, so when I click on this, I know it's this pattern, right? So I zoom in on it and I will show you the sewing. So when you see the sewing, you can see all of the whole segment is sewn together to the armhole and the notches are not matched clearly. So that's why the appearance of the sleeve looks like this. Okay, and now I will go to the other side, and here you can see there are beautiful gathers here, and that is because and it's the same pattern again. I'm mentioning it. So if you if I'm zooming on it, I'm just going to increase the space of my window so you can see it clearly. So if I click on this, here you can see I've clearly matched all the notches, and that's the effect that I got when I matched the notches. So that's why I mentioned it so many times, and I'm emphasized on it that matching notches is very important, because you can clearly see the effect that matching notches can have. Okay, now let's move to another file. So when I open this file, I'm going to show it to you again. I hope you're clearly able to see it. So when I open this file, you can see this file does not open like the other files. In the other files, the center point was the avatar with the garment. Here, it's somewhere here. This is your center point. It's because there is this unnecessary piece here in my 3D workspace, which is not part of the garment. It's left over. See, you can see it in the 2D window and 3D window as well. So that is very important, that whenever you are done with completing your garment, you don't leave any unnecessary pattern pieces here in the workspace. You make sure that you always delete these patterns, because this will change the center point of your 3D window, which would, it will always hinder your workflow, because it will not be precise, and it will create confusion in your 2D window, because right now there is only 3 patterns. You can easily recognize what the other pattern is, but if there were like hundreds of patterns in your 2D work window, you would not be able to recognize what that unnecessary piece is. And this would also increase the size of your 3D file. So that's why you always delete pattern pieces or leftover, that you have cut and sewn a garment, then there was an unnecessary piece which was there, so you delete all those things. Okay, now I already talked about patterns, importing the patterns and exporting the pattern. So whenever you import a pattern, you always check, like any fabric in real life, grain line of the fabric is very important. So here also it works like reality. So grain line is very important. So when I using this edit texture tool, when I click on any pattern piece, you can see this is the grain line. So right now it's on bias, and here it's not in bias. It's along the grain. So right now I will show you how to change the texture of the pattern, but without affecting the grain line. So whenever I want to change the texture of my fabric, I will use this gizmo here, which is, you can see my simulation is still on, but the texture is changing, but not the grain. I can scale it up, scale it down, but my silhouette remains the same. Similarly, I can do that in the 3D window as well. So I can rotate it, but make sure to notice that the drape remains the same. And I can, scale up the texture, scale it down. Now, while my simulation is still on, if I try to change the texture from here, you will see the fall will also change. So right now I'm changing the drape of my fabric. So that would be an incorrect way of changing the texture of your pattern. Whenever you want to change texture, you will always use this edit texture gizmo, which is in the 2D pattern, 2D window and the 3D window as well. Yeah. And if you have changed the grain line, and you don't know in what exact angle it is, you want to align it or reset it again, so you can, I'm going to just increase my 2D window like this, and I'm going to just show you this. So if you right click on your pattern, you will see this option which is called align grain line along x-axis. So if I click on this, it will be a perfect aligned along the x-axis. If I click on this, it will reset back to y-axis. And in styles like this, where you want to create a, you would want to align your texture grain along a specific line, that is also an option available. So align grain parallel to selected. So if I click on this and I want my grain to be parallel to this line, so I'll just click here and you can see the grain aligns to this line. And I want same for my back pattern. So I'll right click, align it along. If I click on this, my grain line aligns, yeah, so my grain line aligns to that specific line. And now you can see I have my texture which is aligned along to in reference to this line. Yeah. Okay, so as we know, different fabrics have different physical properties in reality and in 3D. So right now, if you can see on my window, you can see in my object browser that this is a silk crepe fabric. So I have the physical properties of your fabric is measured using the CLO fabric kit, which gives you how in reality your actual fabrics will look. It gives you a virtual example of it. It looks exactly the same. So if you don't have a CLO fabric kit and you want to add fabrics, so there are these fabrics available in the fabric library. So you can go here and you can see there are different fabrics available. So if I put cotton, it will drape differently than the silk crepe. If I apply a denim fabric, that will have a very different drape than the silk or cotton. And if I give it a knit fabric or maybe leather will be very drastic and very different from the other fabric. And organza would be like this. So whenever you are making any garment, if you don't have the fabric kit, you can always keep it approximately to one of these fabrics. If you hover over this fabrics in the CLO library, you can see these information about all these fabrics, which is classification, which says silk, content 100% silk, weight, thickness and texture. So whatever fabric you are working with in real life, you can always match it approximately to what fabrics are available in the CLO library. Okay, now let's go to this file. I'm going to show you a knit tank top dress. Okay, so if in real life also you are working with knitted fabric and you are working on styles like this, which is a sleeveless top, a tank top with which does not have a rib on the neckline, so it stretches the neckline and the straps of the dress in real life also. So in these kind of cases, what you will ensure is, so I will show what difference it makes. So this is my uh, pattern. I'm just clicking on this segment and you can see in the property editor there is this 2D line length which is 10.412 and the 3D line length which is 11.649. So the difference between the 2D line length and the 3D line length is more than 1 inch, which is a very big difference when you're working with patterns where measurements are very important. So to ensure that this matches, because the weight of the garment is weighing the garment down like it would do in reality. So to ensure to in these kind of places where I'm going to add a mobile on stabilizer maybe. So what I'll do is I'll click on this line and I will click on elastic, and right now the ratio is 80. So 80 would change the physical properties of the pattern. So 80 would not be recommended. 80 is your elastic's default ratio in flow. I will make it 100. So I have clicked on this line and I have clicked elastic on, but I will change the ratio to 100%. So when I click on simulation, you can see it becomes more stable, but I'll show you the exact difference that it makes. So now if I click on the same line, earlier the difference between the 2D line length and 3D line length was more than 1 inch. But now you can see the difference between the 2D line length and 3D line length is approximately similar, and it's very minute difference. So that was the importance of applying elastic. So similarly, I'm going to do it for all of these areas, like the neckline. As I said, it does not have a rib or a seam tape, but in these cases I might use a mobile stabilizer. So I'm going to add elastic with ratio 100 and not less than that. I will enter and then I will simulate, and this would be the correct way of making a sleeveless garment. Okay, now let's go to this file. I've created a t-shirt and a jogger file. So I'm introducing menswear here, and let's zoom in and look at the collar. So whenever I'm applying any kind of rib collar to my t-shirt pattern, you will see that the outlines is very irregular. So if I want to, because a ribbed fabric would have more stretch, but I'm using these two same fabrics here. So what I can do is, if I wanted to perfectly sit on my neckline, I can also change the shrinkage weft, because whenever you're stitching a t-shirt, you would also in real life like stretch the rib to fit it to the neck, right? So I'm just going to change the shrinkage weft here to 90, and if I click on this, and you can see it fits perfectly and it sits perfectly on the neck. But if I have a raw edge collar, so now I'm going to show you how to create a raw edge collar. If you have a raw edge collar t-shirt, I'm going to use internal lines. So internal lines has a lot of different usage in CLO. So here I'm going to use it to create a raw edge. For that, I'll just click here on this line. I'm going to create offsets as internal line because I want a perfectly straight offset of this pattern outline. So right now the distance between the pattern outline and the internal line that I want is 0.08, and now I can also decide the number of offsets that I want. So I want 5. So when I'm creating these internal lines, I can see here in the 2D also how many lines I'm creating. So I will press OK, and I have created these lines, and now you will be able to see it in the 3D window as well. So you can see that 5 internal lines are created. So for a raw edge collar, it would be turned a bit, right? So for that, I want to turn it towards outwards. So for that, I'm going to change the fold angle of all these internal lines. Right now it is 180 degree, you can see it. Now I'm going to change the fold angle to 360 degree. So when I click 360 and I simulate it, you can see it gives a raw, it's turning outwards. So it's turned, and it's created the raw edge of a knit t-shirt collar. But if I zoom in, I'm just going to hide my avatar. So if I zoom in, you can see these sharp lines which are my because of the internal lines. So if I click here, I hope you're able to see the sharp lines of the on the raw edge. So that is because there is something called fold rendering. So if I click on this, all these internal lines along with the fold angle, they also have a fold rendering. I need to always switch this off wherever I don't want very crisp lines. So I've switched this off, and now your collar looks like a natural fold, and it does not have those weird crisp sharp lines. So if you want sharp line, that is fine, but areas where you don't want a sharp line, you will always ensure that the fold rendering is switched off, because these are very small details which are usually ignored but are very important and vital for your further refining of your garment. Okay, now let's talk about facings. So if I want to create a facing on this sleeve hem. So I have this option available where, like how I created offset of an internal line, I'm going to right click and create a pattern outline. So as you know, in the 5.1 version, we created a retract version as well. So you can, or whatever you create, you can always retract it back. Whatever you extended, you can always retract it back as well. So I want 0.1 inch. So let's do that. And then okay, so this is the extension of the pattern that I got. But right now I have the perpendicular option clicked. So that's why it is perpendicular to this segment. If I click extend, it will be extended from the segment. And right now I want a mirror image. So it is a mirror of the pattern outline. And then I want this line, the segment that I selected to create the pattern outline, I want it to be an internal line. So I will click on this create internal line, and I will press OK. And it will generate a pattern outline. Yeah, and now I can use the fold arrangement tool here and select this line and then create a fold. And then simulate. So when I've simulated, now you can see I've created a fold, and my pattern is I've hidden the avatar. You can see my fold is here, and I can also stitch these together. So you can make your garment as realistic as you want. If you want real folds and lines, you can always create that. Now, this was one way of creating a facing. Let's try another method of creating a facing. So here I'm going to use something called tracing. So as you can see a lot of purple lines here. These purple lines are called baselines, and I want to select this. So with the edit pattern tool, I won't be able to select this, right? I'm clicking on it, but I'm unable to click on it. So with the trace tool, I can click on these lines. And here I'm going to show you how you can utilize it. So I'm going to utilize this trace tool to create a facing. So I'm going to click on this pattern outline, and I want this shape. So I'll just going to right click and trace as pattern. So you can see I get this exact pattern here, and in the 3D window also you can see the pattern is generated. So now I would want it to flip vertically, so that happens simultaneously in the 3D window as well. You can see it very clearly. Now let's just stitch it together. Here I'm just going to stitch it like this, and then I'm just going to click on this in the 3D window and then superimpose under. And whenever you've stitched anything to any pattern to another pattern, you can always use superimposing option and it places itself to the part you've sewn. And I've created a facing again. So this is one of the very important tools which you can use, and see, we created that fold. So this was two ways of creating a facing that you can use, and you can use the same technique for different things as well. Okay, so let's focus on the joggers now. So if you can, I'm just zooming in this, I'm just going to close my library. You can see clearly that this jogger fabric has a knit texture. It looks like a knit fabric. So how do we generate this? How do we achieve this texture? So if I click on this fabric, so I know this is my fabric by when I select this, this gets highlighted, so I know this is my fabric. If I click on this, this fabric comprises of a texture and a normal map. You can see in the property editor here, there is a texture, there is a normal map, and there is color, which gives the fabric its appearance. So if I delete this, see, it changed a bit. But if I delete this thing called the normal map, the jogger texture that was on it, the knit texture, it went away, and now it looks like paper. So whenever, that's why we have normal map. Normal map is something that gives you the depth, highs and lows of a fabric texture. So when something is deleted and you might have a new fabric and you want to create that appearance, you can always click normal map. You have this button here. If you click here, this is the preset library of normal maps that is available in CLO, and all normal maps look like this. They have this purple pinkish color, and it is NRM, which is a normal map. So I'm going to click on this. I want a knit fleece terry or knit cotton rayon, anyone. So I can click on this and I open it. And when I open it, you can see the texture reveals itself again. And if I change the intensity, it gets the depth and shadows increases. And similarly, I will add a texture on it. No, sorry, this was specular file. So now I added a texture, and texture combined with normal map gives you this real fabric weave effect, weave or knit effect. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this again. Now I have faced this question a lot of times, that when people are creating printed fabrics, they want the print as well as the texture. So I'm just going to add the texture in, print in. So this is a printed file that I have. I'm going to apply this on the texture. I'm going to change the color to white first, just so that it's more clear. So I have added this print, which looks like this. And if I make a normal map for it, and you can always make normal maps from Photoshop. You add a texture and you go to the 3D option and you can generate a normal map there. So I have created this. Now if I, okay, sorry. Okay, I'm just going to desaturate it. So now you can see it. This is the texture of the print that I added. So this is a very common mistake that we have seen. So this is the normal map of the print that I've generated. But I don't want this. I just want this appearance, but underneath I want a weave texture. So what you will do is you will refresh this again using this, and then using this button again. If you don't refresh it, you would not get this. You will go into this folder, right? That's why refreshing is important. So if you refresh it, this will take you into the CLO preset library. And now using this option, you can add the normal map. So as you can see, I've created a texture of a knit along with the print on it. And whenever you add any kind of prints, so for example, I have added this print, but you can clearly see here the repeat. So the all the inputs that you add for a garment, be it texture, normal map, buttons, like any kind of details, those inputs are going to affect the um, final output of your garment, right? So here you can see this repeat is not proper. It is not aligning. So you can clearly see the repeat is not a good repeat. So this is just to show you, just so that you ensure that these things don't happen. Make sure that your repeat is a good repeat, and so that your final output benefits from it. Okay, now let me bring in a men's shirt. So here, let's talk about the collar again. So as I had created the raw edge t-shirt color, I'm going to use the same technique like internal lines, but there I had used it in a different way. Here I'm going to use it to how do you fold your collar. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into the 2D pattern and see if there is a reference line which is already generated from the 2D CAD software. So if I click on this with the trace tool again, because this is a baseline, if I click on it, this is already generated. So I'll just trace it as an internal line because I need an internal line to create a fold. So you can see I created an internal line now, and to fold, first of all, I will always strengthen it. So right click or control H, which is the shortcut, and strengthen. So whenever I strengthen, it will try to retain its shape, and this is like applying starch to your fabrics because it creates a clean foundation for your fold. So I will always make sure that I've strengthened it before folding it. Now using the fold arrangement tool, I will always zoom in because my internal line is so close to the pattern outline. By mistake, I can sometimes click here and I think I'm using the right technique, but you can clearly see it's not. Why was this? Because I by mistake clicked on the sewing line. So that's why zooming in and zooming out is so important, because now I know I'm clicking on the internal line and not on the sewing line. So I clicked on the internal line, I zoom out, and now when I do it, now I can clearly fold it and it's happening in a correct way. And once I've done this, you can see because I've strengthened the pattern, it is a very clean crisp fold. And if I right click, I unstrengthen it now and it sits perfectly on the shoulder. Okay, so going forward, how I explained in the earlier t-shirt, the internal line always creates a sharp, crisp line which is undesirable in areas like this. You can see how it looks very unnatural because there is a internal line here. So I will always make sure that the fold rendering is switched off. And when I do that, now the fold is rounder and more fabric like. So these small details will help in creating a much more refined output. Okay, so now let's talk about this collar here. So your collar has fusing, and it has a lot of, it is going to be thicker than the main fabric, right? So what I will do is, I don't want to put extra effort and create another layer. If you want, you can always do that. But if I do want just the appearance of a double-sided look, so what I will do is I will click on my pattern here, and I will go in this property editor, and I can see additional thickness render. So I will increase this, and if I press 2, notice in the 3D window, the thickness of your pattern will increase. So you can see now the thickness of my pattern is increased, and if I click on this double-sided, it will give me a double-sided look. So it looks like it is two patterns stitched together, but it is not actually, it's just the appearance of it. If you want to create a double-sided patterns with another pattern here, you can always do that, but you can also create like a appearance of it. Here also I can show it to you. So if I click here right now, it's like a flat, very thin piece of pattern. If I change its thickness, it looks like this. And right now there is no double-sided, that's why it's like a thick piece of fabric. But if I want to make that double-sided look, I have to click on this double-sided, and then I get the double-sided look, and it looks more natural, and it gives that appearance of a double-sided fabric. And now let's look at so this is my cuff pattern, and right now my cuff looks like this, and you can see it does not look ironed properly, or a formal shirt always will have a very stiff cuff, right? So in these areas, what I can do is I can click on it, and I can, in the property editor, I can go and apply something called bond. So bond would be similar to applying fusing to your fabrics, and when I click on it, you can see it changes the shape of the cuff, and it tries to retain its shape much better. And so how do you identify a bond? By areas like this. It will turn into a light orange color, and it will give all these kind of patterns, all these kind of details a much more effective look. So I will also do that for placket, bond, and you can see it's a very subtle change, but it does affect the shape of your placket. And I can do that for the collar as well, and collar stand. Yeah. Okay, so once you've done making your garment, I'm just going to bring it here. Okay, so once you've completed your garment, there are final steps that you need to do to ensure that your garment looks, your fabric looks more realistic. You can give it more shadows and drape. Okay, so for that, there are 4 things. One is particle distance, one is additional collision thickness, and skin offset, and simulation quality. So I'll go through it step by step. So there is something called the particle distance. I'm going to show you this image here. So particle distance is something like DPI. It's like how in images, higher the pixels in an image, higher quality your image will be. But in CLO, higher the smaller the particle distance, higher your file resolution will be. So what does particle distance mean? So here you can see, I'm just going to show you this mesh. All these make up this fabric. So this distance between this point and this point is the particle distance. So right now if I click on it, it's 20, and 20 is the default particle distance. Whenever you are making your garment, you will make sure that it is 20, so your simulation is faster. Because if you decrease it, so if I decrease, please make sure that you're looking at the 3D window as well. So right now this is my sleeve pattern, and right now the particle distance is 20. I'm just going to change it into 5, which is a very low particle distance. And make sure that whenever you decrease particle distance, keep in mind that it is going to slow your simulation, and that's why it is recommended in the last step of your garment construction. So now you can see this sleeve looks very different from this sleeve, right? This has the drape and look of a real fabric, rather than this one, which looks more like a papery. It has more papery corners and it does not look like a fabric. So that is the effect which particle distance creates. So you can see the difference between this. It has the distance between these are huge, whereas this, it's smaller. There are more, and the particle distance is smaller. So that is what particle distance means. So this is the difference between the sleeve, which has these huge triangles, and this has these tiny triangles, and it looks more realistic. This is 5 and this is 20. But while working, you will always make sure that you're working in 20, and you will lower the particle distance only when you've reached when you're finalizing your garment. Okay, so that was particle distance. I hope I've explained it. Now let's talk about this additional thickness collision 2.5. So right now the value of that collision is 2.5. What does that mean? So collision is basically, the additional thickness collision is the collision distance between one pattern and the other. So if it's, for example, this pattern and this pattern, or maybe these two plackets here, so right now there is a certain distance between them, right? I'm showing it from the side view. I hope you all can see it. So right now the distance between this and this, that is the additional thickness collision. If I lower it, I'm just going to lower it to 1, and I'm going to simulate it. You can see it comes closer. So if I reduce it to 0, just doing, it comes much more closer to each other. So that is what additional thickness collision means. It will become much closer than before. Earlier it was like this, and then it, just to make sure that everybody, earlier it was like this, and then I reduced it to 0. So while you're refining your garment and completing your garment, and you are ready for the final stage, you always reduce the collision thickness also. And then there's something called skin offset. So if I click on my avatar, you can see this surface here in the property editor, and there is something called the skin offset, which is 3 right now. So 3 is default. So how there was a distance between each pattern piece as well. Here, what does skin offset mean? Skin offset is the distance. I'm going to show it to you from this angle. I hope you can see it. So you can see this is the skin of my avatar, and this is the collar. So if I change my skin offset to 0 and then I simulate, you can see the collar came near the neck of the skin of the avatar. So what does that mean? Skin offset means your, so earlier it was like this, and then if I do 0, the collar will come closer. So this decreases the distance between the avatar and your garments. So these are very basic small details but very important for finalizing your garments, but you would not go into each pattern and do this one by one, right? Because that is a tedious task. So for that, there is always, you can go into this 3D window and click on this, and you will see this button here, which is called the high resolution garment button. So make sure that, because there are two of them, one is the low res garment, which makes your garment low resolution, and there is something called the high res garment, which makes your garment high resolution. And that's, I hope that's understood. And the one with the high res garment, the high-res garment tool has an arrow which is pointed upwards. So if I click on this, I will automatically get these four options which I explained right now. There is particle distance, there is additional thickness collision, and there is skin offset. So all these are set already to the minimum, like particle distance 5, additional thickness collision to 1, and skin offset to 0. So if I click on this, okay, so now you can see it. There was changes in the file, and you can see the mesh became smaller. So just by clicking that button, you are finalizing a garment, and it is very important that you make sure this is the end process and not initially. When you're finalized with your garment, you only press this then. Otherwise this will slow your workflow, and it will not, it will be very tedious. So when I've clicked the high res garment, my simulation button becomes red in color. So if I long press on it, you will see there's some, this one is already the default, which is simulate complete nonlinear. So we choose this one generally, and if I click on it, you will see the garment is now becoming high resolution. And complete non-linear is basically a most stable way of making your garment high resolution, because it's going to be, because the it's stable and it happens gradually. So now I can wait for a few seconds, and just when I'm achieved my desired look, I can just switch it off, and then I can see now like the fabric has more drape and fall. This is a very stiff fabric, so it has that very dark shadows. And okay, and whenever you're making your garment high resolution and you wanted to change the, so you want to style your garments, or you want to create ensembles, or you want to create a pose, you will always make sure that you are changing the pose of the avatar also before making it high resolution garment, because it will be slower for you after creating your high resolution garments, and then it will collide with your uh, avatar. So it's always recommended that you use you change your poses and all those things before complete making a garment high resolution. Okay, now let's move on to the one of the other shirt files that I have created here. Okay, so this is one of the other shirts that are here, which is already created, and it is already a high resolution garment. As you can see, the particle distance is very small. And now I'm just going to hide my avatar, and let's go on to the render situation. And because I have switched on my render window, there might be a bit of lag in the video. Don't worry, we will reconnect if that happens. So I'm just going to Okay, so I'm stopping it here. I can refine it more, but because the video lags because of opening the render window, I'm just going to show you here. So now what I'm going to explain is we have image properties and we're aware of all this. So you can either render an image, you can render turntable images, you can render an animation as well, and you can render all your colorways together. You can render custom sizes or preset standard sizes. You can render with transparency on or off, because if you're creating garments for your presentation and anything, you can create garments with transparent background, and then you can decide the file format and also if you want a PNG or a JPEG. So I want to explain light properties here, because light, I think, is one of the most important elements in the rendering window, which easily gives you a difference between a realistic and a not very realistic effect. So when I click on lighting, right now the light intensity is 2.5. So you can see it does not give, it is too bright for this fabric. So light intensity also, you will also decide the light intensity depending on the brightness of the fabric that you have. So if it is a very bright fabric like this, it's a white fabric and it's one of the brightest shades, so I will make sure that my light intensity is 1 or lower than that. So it can be 0.8 as well. And I'm just going to click on my interactive button, and the video might lag a bit. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so now you can see my shirt looks more realistic than before, because before the light intensity was too high for the fabric, and now the light intensity is perfect for the brightness of the fabric. So you have to keep in mind all these small details so that you can get a very high quality output. So this is, my light angle is 0 right now, and my light intensity is 0.80, and I'm satisfied with the look of the fabric that I have achieved. So similarly, if you have a very dark colored fabric, so let me just bring in another colorway of this shirt. So I will select this one, which is a very on the opposite end of the other fabric that we have. As you can see, this is a white and this is a very dark black colored fabric. So I'm just going to again bring in the interactive, click on the interactive button, and now you can see this garment here. But you can see I can't see the details of the garment very clearly, right? So what I will do is, for this dark colored fabric, light intensity needs to be higher as compared to the bright colored fabric. So I'm just going to make it maybe 2 or maybe higher than that as well. So I can go from 2.50, and if I click on the interactive button again, now you can see I can see the drape of the fabric much clearly. I'm just going to zoom in. And now because I changed the intensity of the light, you can see I can see the drape very clearly, which I was not able to before. Okay, so this is the front of your garment. this is the front of your garment. If I'm looking at the back of my garment, and if I'm not able to see the details in the back very clearly, so what I will do is I will change the light angle of my. So if you want the same look for your front and back, that is what you're going to do. You will change the light angle to 180-degree so that this will give you a more similar look for your front and back as well. So this is my back right now, and it shows all the details that I want to see. And if I look at my front, it will be. So as you saw, it looks similar on the front and the back as well. That is, so this is a very simple and small detail that makes a lot of changes, and especially light gives a lot of effect and real effect to your garment by creating the depth and the shadow, and also highlighting the textures that you've added and everything. Okay, so we are done with all the topics that we were going to cover in this um, webinar. And so thank you so much for joining in. And we would love for you to give us some feedbacks. So we will take those suggestions and put that into our next sessions. And we would also love for you to give us suggestions if you want in these webinars in different languages. Thank you.
Okay, so like Anisha mentioned, thank you for taking out the time today, and we are always happy to hear from you. The recording of this webinar will be posted on the CLO official channel later this week. So have a great rest of the week. Bye from the CLO India team.
And a happy new year.